I pushed the buttons to let it screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah.
Yeah, we good? Are you ready to start?
Okay.
So we're gonna go ahead and start, and we'll just let people trickle in as they trickle in on this icy Thursday morning. And we are gonna use the mics, even though it's not very many people, because it's streaming and that helps the video. I'm Dr. Catherine Young from Metropolitan State University of Denver. It's in Denver.
And I'm Dr. Winston Grady Willis, also of MSU Denver.
And we run, for lack of a better word, a learning community about cultural competence at the university, at our university. And we've done it 2 sessions now. We did it in the fall and we did it in the spring. We just wanted to share in a really honest sort of way about what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then also get ideas from you, because both of us really like to talk to people and not just talk at people. So we're gonna also ask you to think about what works in classes and what doesn't work, what works when you're talking about issues related to cultural competence and what doesn't work, so that we can get your ideas as well about these sorts of topics.
And if we could, just really quickly, just curious, how many of you folks are currently students? If you just raise your hands. Okay. Okay. And how many of you are members of the faculty, specifically? Faculty member? Okay. And how many of you are members of the staff? Okay. Great. Great.
Thanks. So for us, anytime that we talk about culture, we often like to situate ourselves. You want to go first?
Sure, sure. And just so you know, in terms of this notion of how we situate ourselves, I've always, since childhood in Denver, because Denver is actually my hometown, identified as Black or African American. I prefer the term Black with a capital B. I'm also a heterosexual male, and I am an amputee. We're an artificial leg. And so those are sort of the kind of the primary intersections for me personally. I'm chair of the Department of Africana Studies at MSU Denver. And so as a teaching scholar, issues of blackness, issues of race have always been very important to me, but so have issues of gender, sexuality, socioeconomic class. And so I've always really tried to bring an intersectional lens to the table, not only in terms of my teaching, but also my scholarship as well.
And, excuse me, and I'm a white middle-class heterosexual woman, and I teach in the Department of Teacher Education. I teach people to become middle school and high school teachers, and was a teacher for a long time. And I actually grew up all over the world, and so issues of power and privilege and who gets what and who doesn't and why have always been a part of my world and the questions in my world. And so at MSU Denver, we're an almost 100% open access university, so pretty much if you want to come, we'll give you a chance. If you fail out, you fail out. But 18-year-olds have certain requirements to meet, but if you're older than that, you can come and give it a try. And so we have students from all backgrounds and all ages at our university, and for us, when he said being a teacher scholar, it's actually, teaching is a really important part of what we do, and so is our scholarship. And so my scholarship is around critical race theory and disability studies and issues of intersectionality. And so whenever I'm thinking about schools and schooling, I'm always thinking about who's included and why, and who's excluded and why. And so that's the lens that I bring to thinking about cultural competence. And I think for both of us, so we've done this several times now, and we've devoted our lives to thinking about these issues, but at the same time, we are constantly confronted with what we don't know and what's new coming out there and what what's surprising to us. And this semester, we have somebody in our community who focuses a lot on queer theory, and I feel like she's helped us get more theoretical backing for things we might believe, but we don't necessarily have the theoretical weight that she does to talk about those issues. And so whenever we talk about issues related to culture writ large, I think we like doing it because we're always learning about it.
Yeah.
You want to tell them about the video?
Okay. And so we're next going to show you a video clip. Many of you may have seen this already. So just out of curiosity, a show of how many of you have seen a video that came out, I'm trying to think, how many months ago, that revolved around some concerns of some black male students at UCLA? Because we've got one hand up and some others haven't. So,
and a half.
Yeah, 1.5. Okay, 1.5. We've got an abstention maybe. Okay, so this video clip we have used to start our first session, well, not to start, but actually to end the very first session we have of our learning community. We sort of end it with this video as sort of a, let this give you food for thought. And so we'll simply say this: black students at UCLA, in this case some black men, individuals who self-identify as black men on campus, have voiced some serious concerns about some issues, and students elsewhere, not only in California but nationally, have kind of picked up on this. And this is part of a larger tradition of student activism, generally speaking, black student activism specifically. So just check this out. It's not very long.
In fall 2012, the total enrollment, graduate and undergraduate, for African American males at UCLA was 660 students. That's 3.3% of the 19,838 other males enrolled here. Out of that 660 African American male students, 65% are undergraduate athletes. The number of entering male freshman students was 2,418. Only 48 of them are African American. The graduation rates for African American males at UCLA is 74%, which means out of that 48 freshmen last year, only 35 are predicted to graduate. When we were children, we learned how to mix colors with a paintbrush. We learned that white mixed with anything makes it brighter, but we wouldn't dare mix anything with brown or black, or else our entire creation would be ruined. What we failed to realize was that the untouched dark section of the paintbrush palette became the symbol of the melanin in our skin. The painter only used us to write words that were dark enough to be noticed on a white background. So if words are all we are good for, then don't you dare tell us to silence our voices when we choose to speak. Now you tell me that I should be proud to be at UCLA, when only 35 of us are predicted to walk across that stage, when most of us are dropping out from the lack of financial aid, while Judy Olian, Dean of Anderson School of Management, just spent $647,000 on first-class flights and hotel stays. But waiting for an apology is asking for the impossible, because no snowflake in an avalanche ever feels responsible. But you tell me I should be proud to be a Bruin. When we have more national championships than we do black male freshmen, it's evident that our only purpose here is to improve your winning percentage. So now black high school kids can care less about grades, just as long as the number on the back of their jersey doesn't fade. And you tell me I should be proud to be a Bruin. But according to Professor Sander, 3.3% is far too many black kids. On its perfectly paved roads, there are far too many black kids. This school is not diverse just because you put it on a pamphlet. But you'll name a building after Albert Conasall, who publicly opposes affirmative action? the action that can make our fraction on your demographic pie chart look more than just a second hand on a clock. It's all talk, just to maintain this fraudulent reputation of this institutionalized racist corporation. They don't care about the cultural limitations of being a minority in society, so we have become our own painters, with our own palettes, and we have voices that speak defiantly. So we ignite the flames to help us find the path to our future. Increasing graduations, not incarcerations, transforming education because our numbers can't be any fewer. So don't be surprised that we have become rebellious for what has happened to us. When every black student in class feels like Rosa Parks on the bus, we are trying to rewind time with role reversal as our revenge because we have no other choice when the university refuses to come to our defense. But we have come too far to let history repeat itself. Even when they are peeling off the dark fur of the Bruin pelt, because our faces are just used to cover up from the public what's really inside. Revitalizing lies to perpetuate your disguise. Stop pretending that the wounds of our past have healed. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for a level playing field. Those with less opportunity are fighting for their position, trying to find their place. But those with privilege are hitting triples when they were already born on third base. So with all my brother's hopes and dreams that this university has tried to ruin, how the hell am I supposed to be proud to call myself a Bruin?
Okay, so I don't know how many of you are from the University of Wyoming, connected to the University of Wyoming, perhaps another institution. But a number of the issues that are raised in this video, and it caused quite a firestorm, can be seen at other institutions, particularly larger institutions, institutions that have big-time athletic programs. For instance, some of the contradictions that the students brought up. And by the way, Cy Stokes is the nephew of Arthur Ashe. Those of you who are tennis historians or know about the great tennis player and humanitarian Arthur Ashe. But at MSU Denver, which doesn't have this big athletic tradition and has this history of being a modified open admission institution, as Catherine mentioned, there are still some other issues. There's still some other contradictions. And I know one key thing that, and I meant to say this earlier, so I'll just say it now. Several of us were involved with the Equity and Excellence Scorecard, which came out of USC, University of Southern California. And so that is an effort to look at issues of retention, graduation, specifically as those issues affect Black and brown students, Black and Latino students, and to not look at students from the perspective of a so-called deficit model, but to understand institutionally what needs to change. And so, sure enough, being a member of the Equity and Excellence group, one of the issues that's raised in the video that absolutely is true at MSU Denver is this notion of the distinction between what you see on the pamphlet, what you see rhetorically from the institution when it comes to issues of diversity and inclusion, as opposed to the lived reality on the ground, so to speak. And so MSU Denver is the most diverse four-year school in Colorado, period, right? It's not even close. Over 34% of MSU Denver students are students of color, okay? CU Boulder doesn't come close. I mean, we can go on and on and on. But even despite that, those numbers which look really great on the surface, when you dig a little deeper and you look at retention rates, graduation rates, then we see Black and brown students in concrete terms are lagging behind, okay? And that's one of the issues that we've talked about in the learning community.
And so how we got this started, we have a Center for Faculty Development on our campus so that faculty can get better at teaching. because we think that faculty should be good teachers. And that is not universally held, but it is being pushed more and more that faculty should actually be good teachers and not just doing what they do. And so we were both really interested in this idea of how do we find a place where people can be truthful with each other in an institution. And if you've ever worked anywhere, everywhere has a certain level of politics. Everywhere has a certain level of what you should say to whom and what you shouldn't, and if you get in trouble if you speak to so-and-so this way. And we were interested in having a really open dialogue. But we have these faculty learning communities, but Winston and I weren't really interested in just talking to faculty because that's not just a university, right? And so we got permission to open it up to staff. Honestly, we didn't try to get permission to open it up to students, but we were thinking about wouldn't that be great? And this semester we accidentally have a student in our in our group because she's a full-time employee and a student, and it's been really powerful. Sorry. So we open it up, and so ours is not a faculty learning community, it's a faculty staff learning community. And this is the little blurb that we sent out saying, hey, who wants to come every other Friday for 2 hours during the semester for absolutely no money or anything else? Please just come and talk with us about these things. And usually you're supposed to have 8 to 12 people in a learning community, and we had more than 30 people want to join. And we're trying to be all inclusive, and then we're like, we can't have 30 people. So we pushed it, and we let 18 people in. And as we were thinking about it, we're like, well, what's important? We can't cover, and we didn't want it to be a list of isms. How do you think about this racism? How do you think about sexism? How do you think about ableism? How do you think, we didn't want it to be like that. And so we were trying to find some overarching frames that we thought could encompass different people's perspectives and encompass a wider variety about how to think about these things. And so we come from a perspective of critical multicultural education. So if you take Banks' model of multicultural education and update it to the new stuff that's been written, that is more than about race and culture, and it really includes an intersectional analysis. And critical pedagogy, where learning and teaching actually is a form of power, and you really can speak truth to power. Critical race theory, which questions the norms that are in place, the accepted norms by many, but not all. So for example, the idea that we think we're on a really diverse campus, but if you talk to students of color, they still call it a predominantly white institution versus a historically black college. So in general, white students would never know nor call their institution a predominantly white institution because they don't feel that. They don't feel the whiteness of it. I don't feel the whiteness of it. I just feel like I'm going to work every day. But my colleagues of color definitely, and my students of color definitely feel it. And in teacher education, and you probably have the same problem in your teacher ed department here as we have, and across the nation, our students in our schools as of 2014 are majority minority, meaning there's more than 50% students of color across the US in K-12 schools. And the teachers are actually less diverse in 2014-15 than they were in 1970. Right? It makes you scratch your head a little bit. And because of our personal relationship, I know that students of color don't want to come to our department. Although we think we're inclusive and open and all these wonderful things, there is something institutionally that we are sending them a message that is less than inclusive, that is not showing our cultural competence, it's actually showing our cultural ignorance. So that's how critical race theory and really forwarding narratives that aren't shared, stories that aren't usually shared, was a really important aspect as well. And then we also really wanted to highlight marginalized groups in theory. So women of color, feminists, in the feminist tradition took a long time to get acknowledged as professionals in their own right and their points of view as important as well. And so those and along with disability studies and other critical theories, really undergirded our understanding when we were coming together to think about, well, how are we going to chat with people every other Friday?
And I would just add, in addition to everything that Catherine said, Another element that sort of informed this was intergroup relations. Okay, intergroup relations. And I don't know if I should wait to talk about that or if I should talk about it in a minute? Yeah, okay.
So this was our learning community that we wanted to make and wanted to chat with other people about. But I'm sure you have also been in classes or in learning communities of some sort related to race, class, gender, ethnicity, sexuality. And so we thought just for a few minutes you could just turn to the person next to you or behind you and what experiences you've had, and we're just calling them learning communities, but you can definitely think about them in terms of a class you've been in. What worked for you and what didn't work for you? And it's gonna be your turn to speak into this thing. Yeah? So for like 3 minutes, what's worked in your classes? And if you've not been in any, if you've been in a college class, what makes you feel welcome, makes you feel like sharing, makes you feel like you're a smart person in there? And what makes you feel like not going to class today, right? So I'll pair you up if you don't pair you up. So you don't appreciate the know-it-all, whoever the know-it-all is.
Right.
But that's important, right? So you want a community with no know-it-all.
Right. Like everybody's entitled to feel
Hi. Good. Thank you. Thanks. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're like, that's evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, you have 1 more minute. 1 more minute.
Good, good. And that's what we were hoping there'd be. So we're actually going to ask each group to share out what worked, what made your learning community, your class, your experience feel safe and feel like something you wanted to be a part of and share. And then what was the opposite of that? What made you not feel like it was a place you wanted to be?
Well, I have the example of one of my honors courses, which was a modes of understanding class. It was making American music. And predominantly we had 3 men in the class and like 22 females. And that was a really fabulous class for me. For some reason, it was just like, oh, well, now these are all women. Like nobody's going to talk over you or be mean or tell you that's not an opinion. You can't have that opinion. But in another context, he's a computer science major and I take a lot of computer science classes, and we found that we count the women in our STEM classes, and there were 41 men and 9 females. And the same applies to like our calculus courses, and we found that the disparity that happens in the STEM courses is only rectified in like nursing or predominantly pharmacy courses, in which women and men are relatively equal, or the women might occasionally win out. And those are uncomfortable, I guess.
So you like balance. You like balance. And even in the classes that were overly woman, if you will, you like that you felt like there was balance of voice, even if there wasn't balance of gender. Yeah?
Hi there, my name's Angela, and in the context of professional learning communities, I just mentioned that when I'm out at conferences, I'm with people that I know that are like-minded, and it's really open, and we can share our thoughts. And so that's very welcoming, to know that your ideas will be accepted. But on the contrary, those sort of binary positions of power, when someone is trying to outsmart you or challenge your intellect, those are moments where I feel like, oh, maybe I said the wrong thing.
Do you have anything else in this group you wanted to add? No. Okay.
Ours is kind of similar to what everybody has said. It is intimidating to like speak up in an environment where somebody like thinks that they are smarter in certain things, and so I think that makes an environment like very uncomfortable. Like everybody's voice should be heard equally instead of like one person knowing way more. Like yes, somebody might know more, but like others are still there to learn all the other things that are happening.
Yeah. So, and that's often it's this question of the how, right? It might not always be what they're saying, it could be how they're saying what they're saying.
My most recent experience in a learning community was last fall. I participated in the Asia Pacific Leadership Program at the East-West Center in Honolulu, and I was one of 26 fellows. 16 different nations were represented. I was just one of 4 Americans. So my colleagues were primarily from South and East Asia, and we were selected from, I don't know, anyway, a group of applicants, I don't know how many. In any event, what worked was that the curriculum and the pedagogy was very experimental, and the learning style was, the learning styles, of course, were very diverse across the group. What didn't work is that not everybody was as motivated as I would have thought, and so the level of engagement wasn't as high among some of the participants, which made for a difficult learning experience, in spite of the fact that it was the most diverse community I've ever been in.
I teach for the University of North Dakota, and I work for the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, which is traditionally, as an institution, very white. And it is in a school that is also largely European American, white Caucasian. The specific program that I teach in at this point in the multicultural context is occupational therapy, which is 94% white middle class female. So in finding ways to engage individuals of a broad diversity that are outside of that dominant culture of white female, it's very difficult for us to, first of all, as a group, come to a consensus about what we view diversity to be. And also then, if we are able to identify what we view as a faculty diversity to be, and we actively recruit for that diversity, do we in fact have the support systems in place to make that successful once we bring individuals outside of the dominant culture in? So that's something that we're really struggling right now. In teaching the students in my group who are from the Rocky Mountain region largely, because I'm located at a branch campus in Casper, I have to start by bringing them to an understanding of appreciating their own culture and identifying the attitudes and the values that they place on recognizing their own culture, and then over a period of time encouraging them and sometimes challenging them to, in a way, project the belief and the respect and the value for others' culture in the same way that they feel it necessary that people respect theirs. So to push or to do it in any other way shuts them down.
So nobody wants to be shut down, right? None of us like that feeling. And I heard this group also talking about really wanting hands-on interactive stuff. And for us, we are so busy. We're so busy we can hardly meet to plan to do this, right? And the people who come to us are so busy. And we're like, how do we make 2 hours on a Friday afternoon worthwhile, right? That is the question. And every time we've done it, we've kind of been like, we really hope this is worthwhile. We think it's worthwhile. But really, it's 2 hours on a Friday afternoon. How do we make this worthwhile? Do you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah. And so part of the challenge, because we know you folks are busy, and just to share a little bit about MSU Denver, tenure track faculty members, tenure line faculty at MSU Denver have a 4-4 teaching load. Those faculty who are full-time but not tenure line have a 5-5 teaching load. So that's 5 courses per semester. Members of the MSU Denver staff.
So if you're a student,
Yeah.
that's like
Oh, sorry.
taking 5
Yeah.
classes at a time,
Right,
right? With all the stuff you have to do outside of class.
exactly.
So whether you're a student or a faculty, it's bad.
And so I don't know, for instance, at the University of Wyoming, I don't know what the breakdown is for faculty who are tenure line, if it's a 2-2 load, if it's a 3-2 load. Anybody know? I was just curious. So it's a 3-2. Okay, 3-2, 2-3. Okay. And staff members at MSU Denver, because like a lot of state institutions in the state of Colorado, where I know for a fact, funding for public education, higher education, is much stronger in Wyoming than it is in Colorado, as many of you may know. Colorado, I think right now officially is either 48th or 49th in the nation in terms of funding for public education. Some folks don't even know this. Higher education all the way to K through 12, you know. And so the point is this. People who are staff members at MSU Denver have really, really stressful lives as well, because there isn't the type of support structure in terms of additional staff that the institution really needs. So that's just to kind of reiterate what you said. So given that, how can you make this learning community worthwhile?
So I don't think we call it a syllabus, I think we call it guidelines, that we handed out on the first day was really like, what do we think we could do together? And so we gave everybody a few books, because academics love books, and we gave everybody a few books, and then as we went through the semester, we had a topic That's what's in bold of the week. And then we decided to give lots and lots of choice. So one of the books was really theoretical and really kind of hard to read. You really had to sit down and be quiet and focus with it. Another book, and really long chapters. Another book had like 3 or 4 page chapters and really just got to the point really quickly. And so we were trying to think about, and this wasn't a faculty staff question. We weren't saying faculty want the theory book and staff don't. We were saying, how much time do you have Friday morning to read before you come to hang out with us? And then we were also trying to be really honest about how do we organize this learning community if you didn't do your reading? Because we still wanted people to feel welcome. And so we really went through, and we'll talk about this cultural trust activity in a minute, so kind of who are you? And then we talked about different forms of privilege, and then excuses people make to excuse away their privilege. Oh, it's not happening because of this, or it's actually your fault. There's this great yes, but article in there. And then this idea of difficult conversations, because if we're on a university and we're all caring to talk about these conversations more and we don't like that feeling of discomfort, how do we get better at being uncomfortable? It doesn't mean mean, and it doesn't mean shouting somebody else down, but how do we get better at being uncomfortable together? So we have stuff about difficult conversations, and then we're really big into this who cares question. Like, I'm so nice you came to hang out with us, so nice you wanted to sit with us on Friday, but like, really, who cares that we're talking about this stuff? Who cares about cultural competence unless there's some action, unless somebody's doing something, right? Which is where it moves into social justice, that you actually need to do something, not just talk about these things all day, every day. And so the last few weeks are about impact. Impact is one, what to do is one. Oh, and I forgot, we're becoming a Hispanic serving institution, an HSI, through the federal government. You have to have 20% Latino students, 25%. And so we were bringing this idea of a language. How do professors and staff interact with students who might speak English with a strong accent or speak a different language as their first language, and how do we see that as a strength, not as a deficit? And we acknowledge through the readings that we've chosen, there is a lot missing. We meet 8 times, we meet 16 hours total. There is a lot missing. And so we really thought of these as frameworks so that people could bring in other readings. And we actually asked participants if they would take a half an hour and share with us about things we don't know much about. And one of the things somebody talked to us about was that this was a very American version of the world, and it wasn't very international. And so she came and one of the things she talked about was providing more international perspective to the syllabus. And it was missing because it's not what either of us actually think about on a day-to-day basis. So it was missing, right, because of our privilege that we didn't have to think about that. And so she brought that in to enrichen the conversation.
Yeah. And to come back to the treasure chest activity, we showed you the video from the students at UCLA. That was the bookend of the very first session, but what started the session was the first homework that we provided. And this is something that some of you may have done already in some context, might think about doing it yourselves. We asked everyone, including ourselves as co-facilitators, to bring 2 artifacts to the very first session. One artifact speaks to the person's professional identity. And so, for instance, I brought the brochure for our department, right? Simple enough. The second artifact speaks to some aspect, some part of your personal identity. And so we really stressed that you will, in the larger group, pass these artifacts around and talk about their significance to you. And we've done this formally twice now, and it was very powerful in each instance.
So as we moved into this, we have these critical theories in our heads, we really moved into how can we be intentional about how we bring these people together. Again, we said we couldn't take everybody that we wanted to take, but we really wanted balance. So with these critical theories in mind, and we were trying to think, how do we balance male, female? Because we wanted to make voices. How do we balance people of color and white people? How do we balance staff and faculty? And part of this balance is done in a really weird way because we didn't know everybody personally. So then there we are, relying on stereotypes to figure out, is this person Latino? Right? And we're having this conversation, looking at each other like, how are we having this conversation?
Shame on
But
us.
we also knew we really wanted to be intentional, that we didn't want 18 people that look like me and him sitting around a table. Because it wasn't going to foster the same sort of conversation. So we probably should have audio taped it. It was such a strange conversation. So we're really trying to balance it. And you might try to balance for sexuality, but often, if you're not heterosexual, you're not wearing your heterosexuality on your arm. Right? So we were really trying to be intentional. So we could be intentional in terms of staff, some, not everybody.
Yeah. And so one of the things that really informed this effort at balance is intergroup relations. And so some of you may be familiar with intergroup relations. The acronym is IGR. It grew out of the University of Michigan. And one of the graduate students who was really involved with IGR at Michigan is now a professor at Skidmore College, liberal arts college in upstate New York. That's Dr. Christy Ford. And so when I taught at Skidmore, my wife and I taught at Skidmore before we came to MSU Denver 4 years ago, we were involved in IGR. And so IGR has this effort to intentionally, very explicitly and unapologetically have students enroll in these learning communities based on their racial self-identification, okay? And so there's this effort to strike a balance between students of color, self-identified white students. Eventually, the program took off so much at Skidmore that there was also a student of color learning community that was established, a white student learning community that was established, just strictly white students, to talk about issues of privilege, right, within that context. And we eventually got a staff and faculty, not a learning community in this sense, but a group that met 2 or 3 times during the semester together. And the whole point around IGR is to be able to look at the connection between some theoretical stuff, as we do, and the bedrock significance of lived experience, okay? And that's really what drove things.
And so that's what drove our learning community as well. And so our vision behind it was really making a space people could come and chat on Friday, hopefully having done the readings, but okay if you didn't. And the format really honored this idea of who are you as a professional and who are you as a person. Because you might say you leave so-and-so at home, but you're not. You're just hiding your so-and-so, right? And so, for me, the fact that I am a mother of young children impacts every one of my professional decisions. It just does. And I would love to say it doesn't, but, my 2-year-old was up 3 times last night. I was not happy by morning, right? So, which is why I'm a cup of tea. So, they do impact your professional decisions, and they impact when you're a student here, right? When you're a student, it impacts who you are as a student, and when you're a faculty or staff member, or community member, your personal life does impact your life outside of your house, and the other way around. So in terms of every single reading, we asked, how does this impact you as a person? How does this impact you at the university? How does this help you think about your role at the university? And we had people in the fall. We had the provost, we had two deans?
One dean, and then
Several chairs,
someone in the president's office.
Oh yeah, several directors of departments. And so although there were staff, they were really high-level staff, and it ended up being a really interesting group across campus. And this spring, unfortunately, we don't have very many staff, and it's made a huge difference in how the staff feel they can speak. They don't feel like they have as much of a voice because there's all these faculty around. And we keep working to balance that, but there's only 2 of them, and so no matter what we do, it is still imbalanced, and it is still felt pretty dramatically by them.
Definitely.
And so as much as we work for the balance, our question always is, how does it impact you, and then how do you think about this in terms of the work you do at Metro? So from fall, we learned a few things. One, we gave you our fall syllabus. We'll give you our spring one. Our fall one had too much flexibility. People actually couldn't handle having 10 choices of readings at all. It was a really bad idea. I thought it would be the best idea in the world. He was on board. They just couldn't figure out what to read. And some people were trying to read all 10, and we were like, no, we really mean we want different readings. And if everybody reads different readings, we'll have a really great conversation. So people really did not like our flexibility. We also had an online site where we stored a lot of the readings, and we tried to do a discussion board once. It was a pretty much big failure. And partly because I think he and I are not fabulous at interacting in an online forum. So we were not very good role models for that. But it's a really great question about how do you extend a community? Well, online is a great way to extend a community. But maybe online through our closed system was not so great. And then the last thing all faculty and staff learning communities are asked to do is to create concrete artifacts. So each individual or group or something is supposed to have a takeaway. Maybe you make a tip sheet, maybe you write an article, maybe you, we have a conference tomorrow in Denver, and so, it's just to keep you awake. Good. And some of the people from this semester are presenting at the conference tomorrow. So people are supposed to have a product that they make. And we were so surprised how little people wanted to make a concrete product, even if it only took them half an hour to make it, half an hour to do it. They really wanted the conversation. They wanted the community. They did not want to make a something. And that, we didn't think that would be a big deal. That seemed to be a really big deal. And in fact, people would like go to the bathroom during the time when we were supposed to talk about that. All professionals, they'd be like, oh, I have to take a phone call. And I'd be like, right now? And then you'd come back and they'd be like, oh, I don't know yet. I'll talk to you about it next week. And they would just dodge us. And we're like, this is so interesting. Why? You know, and part of it is it's hard to put things about cultural competence down on paper because it is changing and it is variable and it is in the moment. So it is hard to do anything concrete about it, right? By the very fact of what it is.
One thing that became clear, we saw this in the fall 2014 faculty staff learning community. There was a profound emotional impact for participants. And it started with the very first cultural chest sharing moment. I mean, even individuals in positions of power, just broke down. I mean, it was kind of an amazing moment for establishing rapport, a level of trust. There were some intense interactions, not necessarily negative at all, but just sometimes some intense interactions, discussions, not only within the context of the learning community, but often when the learning community formally ended, there would be side conversations that would continue for some time. And then we later found out that some members of the learning community, because of this impact, not only up here, but here, began having conversations among themselves outside of the learning community, which was really, just really, really powerful.
And we did intentional pairings, so back to intergroup relations. We did a time where staff got to sit here and faculty here, and staff got to say whatever they wanted to say to faculty, and faculty weren't allowed to speak.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Yeah.
It was very humbling.
Yeah, it was.
And they weren't necessarily saying, you, Catherine, you did this.
Right.
They were just saying, faculty as a whole treat us this way. Yeah. Faculty, and they're saying not all faculty, not everybody, how do you generalize without essentializing, right? And then we did people of color,
Yeah.
talking to white people.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
And this sort of an unintended outcome, one of the members of the group in the fall who did decide ultimately to participate in this exercise, it's often called the fishbowl exercise, was themselves someone who's biracial. And so they brought to the table this issue of, look, with all due respect, I'm beyond these easy categorizations. And honestly, there's a part of me that doesn't appreciate having to choose whether I'm with the self-identified white group or the people of color group, because I'm a part of both groups.
Or
and so
neither
that,
group.
Yeah, or neither group, right? And so that sparked an interesting conversation in and of itself about identity.
And then we really struggled with the balance of like-minded versus non-like-minded people. So in the fall, we were all having a little love affair.
Yeah.
We were all very like-minded, and it was this really safe place to get more energy to go back to the work that we did in our departments. Well, now in the spring, we have a lot more diversity of viewpoints, and sometimes we're sitting there going, you said what? Right?
Exactly.
But we're not creating a safe space then.
Right.
How do you move in these conversations if they don't have a right to say what they want to say too? And so we've had to work with each other about putting our own stereotypes about people who are not like-minded to the side, so we can be welcoming, so we can have intense dialogue that is actually generative, that is actually useful. And I think what's happened in there is the community has modeled for itself that we can have disagreements, philosophical disagreements, disagreements about affirmative action, disagreements about tenure or staff having longevity at an institution, that we can have those disagreements and we can think really strongly about it, but it doesn't have to be hateful and it doesn't have to be in a way that puts other people down. And so it's been a really great space for figuring out how to do that. After the first week, honestly, we were like, whoa, I wonder if he's gonna stay this semester. We were not very generous after our first week. Yeah. And then we moved, I think we've done a really good job of really now enjoying what it means to have much broader diversity of opinion.
Yeah, yeah. And lastly, just in terms of institutional impact, one thing that has already been mentioned is that at the first learning community, you actually have the provost, a dean, someone in the president's office taking part in it. Oftentimes, you don't get that type of institutional buy-in from folks who have a significant role on campus, who are like right there at the nexus of power. I mean, they're there. And so because of that participation from folks in the administration, all of whom had at one point or another themselves been teaching professionals at one point, the decision was to go ahead, green light us doing it again this semester. There's already discussion about something happening next year, though the two of us hope that some other folks will step up to the plate as facilitators, because this is intense, it's intense work. The other really great impact is that the faculty, staff, learning community is happening in terms of this larger moment when the institution is trying to address and look at issues of inclusion, not just from a quote-unquote diversity perspective, but from an equity perspective. And that's really, really important.
So because this is always a work in progress for us, we thought you could take this, or just the back page, and we thought we'd make the front 2 rows into a group and then the back rows into a group for you to design your own learning community. So you can decide what are your framing concepts. So they could be theoretical, or they could just be, we want to talk about these sorts of things. And then what topics would you cover? So what would your bold bullet points be that you think would be really important in if you needed to create a learning community related to cultural competence. And you can take it any way you want. So we thought we'd give you about 10 minutes chatting like that, and each of us will come join one of the groups, and then you could share those out. And so you can take ours as a start and say, I'd keep some of this, and I'd throw the rest out, or I would only do, so we're not saying please give us the readings and do all of that, but we want to know, what do you think needs to be in there?
Yeah.
And also, what would you leave out?
Right. So for instance, I mean, we acknowledge that the learning community that we've been a part of at MSU Denver really, in many respects, though we really strive for intersectionality, is race-driven, right? A lot of the readings really tend to focus on the social construction of race. You may decide, well, no, with all due respect, we want to model something around sexualities, okay? And so this is how it might look. This might be a particular reading that we might want to have. Just as one example.
You know your groups.
So I think if I was designing this course, well, I identify as an intersectional white male and a bit of a natural optimist. I have some devil's advocate in my genes. So I'm always sort of the guy in the corner who's sort of questioning things unintentionally almost. But I feel like one of the things I really like to see in group discussion like this is sort of researching a lot of these issues and finding like real facts and real numbers and things like that, because I think for a lot of people out there who tend to be skeptics of, these issues, people say, well, the problem is it I think it is, because I don't think it's true. At the same time, my mind is sort of a hard time back to the same just because I'm not really as invested in or part of it, I think. So.
There's a family in Cheyenne.
Yeah.
Their last name is Carmel. Very, Hispanic family. Long history of violence and substance issues and arrests. It's really interesting to me because
bringing that humble, that level of humility to both levels there. You know, where you can just go in and have a conversation. It's like, I know I'm in my seat. This is my last semester here, and like, you know, I go to my floor and I have professors that I can just walk by their office, chat for like a few minutes, and it's great. And there's some of my favorite professors, and there's still some that I really talk to because I know they're here for research and
That's how it works.
I think it's not even so much about doing it specifically and just trying to do that way, you know. Exactly. You know, and the students talk with the teacher like this. I don't understand things from your perspective. You know, what can I do to better myself here? And being like, hey, you know, I'm trying to teach you. Introverted, try to think, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. You know, what can I do?
Everything from that to being respectful.
Or even the training process. I mean, just because obviously there's areas of branch that some things that I watched one of my professors that I don't mind cry, but it's just because I think we're over tears. I think for me, I asked her what she was texting because it's like that is just and the average person, she kind of just freezes. So it's like that just no, obviously so I think having some real solid
Be tolerant of the intolerant.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's a lot of, you know, I guess what I work on too is just, you know, how do I, yeah, exactly. How can I have compassion and understanding for them?
I mean, one thing I do like to facilitate is to like criticism, affirmation. Like, you know, you have something critical to say, but then you follow it up with something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the faculty's responsibility though too, is to address these things. You know what I'm saying? Because if someone says something in class and they just let it go, it's like, what is that teaching us? We just don't stand up and say anything. If people are offensive and they're being painful, what do? We just kind of like exactly.
Well, and it's gonna be, it's gonna be not
But yeah,
I know, but it's hard. It's hard.
So, since we have two groups, each group gets to tell the other one the takeaway points. Yeah? Since I'm standing here, oh, you have one too. Well, we're gonna go first. How's that?
That sounds good.
All right, so, so the question is, if you were to design a learning community about cultural competence, either from scratch or from this, what would you do, right?
One of our main points is that we would like to add students to the curriculum because a bunch of staff and faculty talking to each other about how they should be better or could be better would be really helped by a student perspective of how we see you and how you could better see us.
Pass the mic around. One of the other main points that we came up with is finding a balance of creating safe, caring environments that you sort of work from more of a student-centered philosophy in creating a caring professional and learning community.
So I was just sharing at first, if you have the time and space, it might be interesting to have the participants self-identify to the groups that they are a part of, and sometimes we are a strong part of our identity is actually not who we speak to our identity about. You know, somehow take that information and then also see who's not included in the identities present in the room. So.
Okay.
In the back?
Did you want to go?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we'd also discussed bringing in some opposing viewpoints, watching videos or role playing and things like that, because I think it's easy to talk about these differences, when everybody sort of agrees
Great. And from this group, who wants to?
Oh, come on. Just for that.
Okay. Thank you, cohort. So I think something that we had talked about was really about being able to identify not only your dominance and your privilege, but also being able to identify your subordinate group. Identities, I think that this dynamic allows people to see themselves as more multifaceted and dynamic versus, well, I'm only privileged or I'm only subordinate. You know, it brings a realism that we have so many different identities, and so it's hard to make assumptions about someone because, well, you just never know.
Do you have one last comment?
I
And
think
then we're going to wrap up because we have about 2 minutes left.
I think what we saw happen here, though, as we were talking, is that they're all social work majors, and they had this moment where they recognized that there's a gap in something that they really critically need before they go out and start working in the field, and that is this safe space for them to be able to address issues and provide feedback. So I would love to know that they are able to create some kind of a learning community that they could do those things in, so.
Nice. Thank you, both groups, and I think your group, probably like our group, just had a fabulous conversation in and of itself. And just in the interest of time, we really just wanted to come chat about this because we're always into the idea of conversation and growing and changing and learning from each other, but we're also into the idea about being honest about the messiness of it and honest about it doesn't always work and it's not always as perfect as we want it to be. And whenever we're talking, we try to be really honest about our viewpoints and the things we haven't figured out yet and things we don't know how to do yet.
Right.
And so our goal really, so hearing from you was really valuable to me.
Yeah, no, invaluable to me too. And it's just a reminder that sometimes when things get really, really difficult and you feel like you're literally doing this type of work all alone, it's moments like this, you know, going up over the mountains and the blowing snow and the ice on the road, we're like, oh my gosh, what is this? You know, is it 287? It was like, woo, okay. But it's moments like this that remind us that there are other folks in so many different places that are doing the same work, have this similar commitment, and it's just important to be able to connect with one another.
Yeah. And so thank you for sharing and thank you for being all interactive with us because we don't sit up there by ourselves very well. So thank you and have a nice, rest of the conference.
Thank you, that was wonderful. And just to let you both know, we had